If you're on a budget and looking at 10-inch miter saws, there are two that are worth taking a close look at. One is the Kobalt 358938, and the other is the Harbor Freight Chicago Electric 61972. In this video, I give you an in-depth, feature-by-feature comparison of these two very popular miter saws. Let's take a look at the specifications for the Harbor Freight Chicago Electric saw. This one happens to be model number 61972, and I've seen this offered a number of different ways. I happened to acquire this one without a blade. It was being sold without a blade. Sometimes you'll see it with a blade, sometimes you'll see it without a blade on the Harbor Freight website. So this is a 10-inch 15 amp single bevel sliding miter saw. It runs out at about 5,000 RPM. The cut is 2 3/4 by 12 inches. However, I have cut 4x4s up against a fence. There is no laser on this saw. Warranty is about 90 days, and the price at the time of this recording is $109.99. Let's take a look at the specifications for this miter saw. This happens to be the Kobalt model number 358938. As I shared with you earlier, this is a 10-inch 15 amp. Runs out at about 4,800 RPM. It is a single bevel sliding compound miter saw. Does have a laser, which we're going to look at in a little bit, and it does have some real good miter stops. There are some very good supports on this saw. It does have dust collection. The specifications are showing that it will cut crown molding up against a fence as large as 5 3/4. Base molding, it'll cut up to 3.5 up against the fence. The warranty is 3 years, and at the time of this recording, this retailed for about $179 before discounts and before tax. Let's take a look at the right-hand side of the Harbor Freight miter saw. Here you have a simple trigger mechanism which is easy to operate. No safety mechanism here. Does have a handle in order to pick it up, but because of the weight distribution of this saw, you're going to have to put one hand here and another hand on somewhere on the back to lift it up. Otherwise, it's just going to be too heavy on that side. The yellow knob down there is to control whether this goes back and forth or not. Excellent for storage. When it comes to tilting this up, all you do is lift and turn that. It brings it up so it's operational. When you want to store, just take this, twist it, put it back into place. Now you're locked into place. You also have a dust control bag here. However, with this unit, I found the dust control really is not that good. It will collect some, but not very much. You do have the depth control knob here, which is on the other side. I'll show you that in a few minutes. You also have some extensions, which are controlled by this. I'm going to go more into the extensions later on. And of course, you do have another place from not only this side, but the other side for your clamping mechanism. And then you do have 4 holes all the way around for bolting it down onto a table or a bench, which I strongly recommend that you do. They're also, I'm going to call them like rubber grommets, almost acting like feet, would kind of insulate it against, maybe just a little bit against the vibration. So that's the right-hand side of the Harbor Freight miter saw. Let's take a look at the left-hand side of the Harbor Freight miter saw. Standard blade guard. This one happens to be transparent. Simple blade guard control. Dust bag again. You do have this control for depth control. That's controlled by twisting this up or down, and then popping this lever in and out will either engage or disengage this. Back here again is the stop for this. Bevel control back here, which I'm going to cover in depth a little bit later on in this video. Also, you do have a little clamp here, a very simple one, as well as a way to tie it down with this. And again, we've got the extensions on both sides and the way to tighten those down and hold them in place. And again, I'm going to talk more about the extensions later on in this video. Let's take a look at some of the features found on the Kobalt from this particular view. One of the things that I do like is the additional safety for starting up the saw. There's a thumb button you have to depress before you pull the trigger So it gives you that extra margin of safety so you don't accidentally fire this off by lifting it up. This is the control for the laser, which I'm going to show you a little bit later on. There are two very good handles that are well balanced for the shape and size of this saw. So there's one here just over the motor and one in the very back. The depth control is right here behind this cord. This cord is just a little bit in the way, so anytime you want to set this, you're going to have to move the power cord out of the way. Onboard storage for your wrench for changing out your blade. It does have a dust control bag, so you can hook up your shop vac to it. I do like this little cowling that sits over the rails so they don't get covered with sawdust. They're less likely to get fouled. And then you do have the control here that locks this rail in place. And then you have this little simple knob right here that you pull back, lift up, or bring it back down, press it into place, and that locks it into place for storage. So let's take a look at the other side of the Kobalt miter saw. It does come with a 10-inch 60-tooth blade. Does have a transparent blade guard so you can see what's going on. The control mechanism for the blade guard is easy to see, easy to keep clean. You do have onboard storage of your power cable. Of course, another shot of the dust bag. It does come with a pretty good clamp. This is a higher quality clamp than you'll see on many other miter saws. There's also this wall or this control panel here that when you pull this lever back, you can slide it forward and control it in place to give you a different way of controlling your workpiece. In addition, you do have the extensions, which I'm going to show you more about later on in the video. On the back side, you do have controls here for controlling the angle or bevel of the miter saw. And you do have some stops that are built in and some stops down here. So I'm going to talk more about those in a little bit. Let's take a look at the footprint for the Harbor Freight miter saw. The extensions on the left and on the right hand side do not retract, so you literally have to remove them if you're going to start without them. If you leave those on like I do, you're right at, 27 inches. That's with the extensions on. If you take them off, it's about 17 or 18 inches. Front to back, this ends up being just about 28 inches from the front to the back. With the arm up, you're looking at just about 22 inches, and it's a little over 15 inches when it's put down in place. So that's the footprint on the Harbor Freight miter saw. Storage is always a consideration for any of the major power tools that you have in your shop. So let's take a look at the footprint for the Kobalt miter saw. With the arm extended all the way up, this is right at about 22.5, almost 23 inches. With the arm extended down and locked into place, it's about 16 inches. The width comes out just shy of 24, as you can see right there. And then the depth, if we look at the depth from front to back, then it's coming out at just about 27 inches. Okay? And of course, if you tilt the angle of the saw to about 45 degrees, you can shave another 2 or 3 inches off the depth of the footprint for this miter saw. As I mentioned earlier, this miter saw does not come with a laser. I have seen saws that look almost exactly like this one from Harbor Freight with a laser, but this one does not come with a laser. Many of the newer miter saws are coming with lasers as a standard feature, and the Kobalt is no exception. Here's the laser right here. And then there's the adjustment ports. This one happened to come directly from the factory, adjusted pretty well. And then up here on the handle, I already have it turned on. There's the control on off. I'm going to come down here and see if I can get you a close-up view of this. So as I bring this down, you can see that the blade comes just to the left of that laser. So it's a very good guide for helping you to adjust your workpiece to exactly where you want it to be. So that's the laser on the Kobalt miter saw. Some time ago I produced a video titled How to Get the Most Out of Your Miter Saw. And whether you have this one or you're going to purchase another one, I believe there's some really good tips in there that might be able to help you out. So make sure you check it out. I'll put the link to that title in the description below. Let's take a closer look at the miter gauge and control on the Harbor Freight. So as you can see here, those are all the increments. They run all the way around. And then there's the indents. Underneath the sliding portion, you do have this little bolt here that's adjustable. So if your workspace is not perfectly level and you want to keep this from wobbling, and maybe for some reason you haven't bolted it down, this will help you to keep it a little bit more stable. When you want to move it, just like any other miter saw, all you have to do is turn this counterclockwise and hold this, depress this little tab down and move it into the position that you're looking for and let it up, and it'll pop into one of those indents that you see right there. Let's take a closer look at the miter gauge and controls on the Kobalt miter saw. So I'm going to get in here nice and close. You notice you have all these detents in here that are the most commonly used angles. Then to move things around, all you have to do is pull up on this lever right here, loosen this knob counterclockwise and move it into position. If you're going to be going back and forth and using angles that are not common, then all you have to do is lift up this lever, push this little button in, and then you can slide it to about any position that you want. And it's not going to stop on all these detents as you go. Once you get into place, all you have to do is tighten down this knob and you're good to go. Another point that I wanted to make on this saw is on all four corners you have holes that are already in place that allow you to bolt this down to your workbench or table or whatever you're using. And I always recommend that you do that. So make sure any opportunity you have to bolt it down, you do so. Let's take a look at some of the factory alignments on the Harbor Freight. Vertical alignment was just fine directly from the factory. When I checked it on 45, it was off considerably, and I'll show you a little bit more about how I adjusted that later on in this video. The miter gauge on the Harbor Freight came from the factory aligned perfectly, as you can see there with my square. Both at 90 degrees and 45 degrees, it was spot on. Let's take a look at the factory settings on the Kobalt miter saw. Setting the table to exactly 0 degrees, it comes out almost perfectly at 90 degrees using my square. And then I used my speed square earlier and checked it at 45 degrees, and it came out almost perfect 45 degrees. Another factory setting to be concerned with is on a miter saw is how well it's aligned at 90 and 45 degrees. And as you can see here, it's almost perfectly set at 90 degrees, and I checked it at 45 and found it to be dead on for this Kobalt miter saw. The bevel control on the Harbor Freight is very similar to others. All you have to do is loosen this little yellow handle and then begin tilting it over, get it to the position that you want it, and then tighten down the yellow handle. And this will go all the way over to 45 degrees. Now, I found from the factory mine was off, so in order to change or adjust any of the settings here, the bevel, you have to adjust these two set screws, and then if there's a significant difference, then you also want to change this little guy here. Loosen that little nut or that little screw, and then go ahead and change this up a little bit. But that's what I had to do for this saw, because it coming from the factory, the 45 degrees was way off. Let's take a look at the bevel control on this miter saw. There's the knob that locks everything into place, and of course the gauge that gives you the increments all the way along, all the way over to 45 degrees. And then you notice you have this little stop here that is adjustable. Okay, There's one on the other side I'm going to show you in just a moment. Another point that I want to make is, you remember this wall that I showed you that was movable at the back? That has to be moved all the way over to the left. Otherwise, it interferes. You see how I moved it over? It interferes with the blade if you don't move it over out of the way. I'm going to give you another angle of that in just a moment. Let's take another look at that fence on the left-hand side. If you don't move it out of the way, I'm going to bring this down. And you can see how it interferes with it. It doesn't come all the way down to 45 degrees. So I'm going to tilt this back up, slide this guy back out of the way, and now I can bring this down to a full 45 degrees. So in this saw, you need to be able to move that little fence control device or setting right there. Also on this side, you notice right here, this little control, if I push it in, it'll stop it at 33.9. If I pull it out, it stops it at 45 degrees. Okay? And then you have these little incremental controls or adjustments you can make to ensure that you have an absolute 45 degrees. So that's the bevel control on the Kobalt miter saw. Let's take a look at the noise level for the Harbor Freight miter. So that's right there at 105. And if you look at this chart, that's down into the red. So anytime you're using this miter saw or any other, make sure you have hearing protection for yourself and those that are working with you. Let's see what the noise levels are on the Kobalt miter saw. So as you can see right there, it's just shy of 100 in terms of its decibels, which is pretty loud. And I think it's important to keep this in mind because as you look at this chart right here, you're running into the red. So make sure anytime you're using this miter saw or really any other miter saw that you're wearing hearing protection. I hope I've been able to provide you with enough insight into the specifications and features of these two power tools to help you identify the one that best meets your requirements and your budget. I've uploaded a number of other table saw, miter saw, and drill press comparison videos and have placed their links in the description below. So please take a look at them. If you find this video of value, please press like. And if you're not already a subscriber, I'd love to have you as a subscriber. And as always, good luck on your projects. Let's take a look at the right-hand side of the Harbor Freight miter saw. This little yellow doodad right here is the trigger control. Doesn't have any safety mechanism on this. The whatchamacallit on the top makes it easier to lift, but you're going to have to use two hands, one here and one down there. There's no handle down there to lift this up, otherwise it's going to tilt down on you. You got a whatchamacallit to control the thingamajigs right here. This little guy right here pulls out and twists up and allows you to do whatever you're going to do right there with the saw. And then, of course, you got this thing here for dust control. And you also have another whatchamacallit on this side to control the whatever it is for the deal right there. Let's take a look at the other side of the Kobalt miter saw. It does come with a 10-inch, 60-inch blade. Oh, that's great, 60-inch blade. Let's take a look at the other side of the Kobalt miter saw. It does come with a 10-inch, 60-tooth blade. Obviously has a blade guard. All the mechanism for the blade guard is easy to see, easy to keep clean. Again, another view of the dust bag. It does have onboard borage. Great, that's good.